in the place of legislators. She'll explain. And there was more than just a passing interest today in the sale of tickets for the Irish rock group U2. This is the first day of sales. Will there be any left by the end of the day? Well, we'll tell you on the news in just a half hour. Now this.
He said it would be like this!
Steve with another nice day tomorrow. Join us at 6.
French President Mitterrand travels to the front line in the war among the former Yugoslav republics. And will Ross Perot get what he wants for his birthday? This is the CBS Evening News. Good evening, I'm Edie Magnus, sitting in tonight for Bob Schieffer. With the European community urging that UN troops be deployed to what used to be Yugoslavia, French President Francois Mitterrand decided to personally intervene. Mitterrand flew to Croatia today and tomorrow plans to drive to the embattled city of Sarajevo, where, as Jim Stewart reports, fighting continues to escalate.
One of the most intense bombardments of the Yugoslavian civil war erupted at dawn today over the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo. The Serbian barrage came despite a 48-hour United Nations deadline to stop the violence or face the likelihood of international military intervention. Although fighting had slackened by afternoon, UN observers are wary.
The last 3 or 4 days have certainly not been grounds for optimism. Hope and optimism are no longer part of my vocabulary.
The UN Security Council will meet in closed session Monday after the deadline expires to decide on the next course of action. European community leaders meeting in Lisbon today call for military action to secure the safety of relief flights to Sarajevo as the president of Bosnia pleaded for action.
Humanitarian aid is not enough, and that only military intervention by the international community can put to an end the aggression against our country.
The Pentagon is almost certain to play a role in any intervention. In a major policy shift, the United States is now willing to provide combat air patrols over Sarajevo to protect UN relief flights to that city. No U.S. ground troops or air cargo crews would be committed. U.S. bases in Germany, northern Italy, and Sicily, as well as the aircraft carrier Saratoga, are likely staging areas for American aircraft. In addition, the Navy is surveying what security would be required at several Yugoslavian ports if relief supplies are brought in by sea lift. But the White House is eager to keep U.S. participation at a minimum and clearly worried at the prospect of getting involved at all.
To talk about walking in there and dealing with a problem that is as intractable probably as that which has been going on in Northern Ireland or in Beirut is a dangerous thing.
But word that President Mitterrand will go to Sarajevo is sure to be welcome here. President Bush and his military advisors want the European community to take the lead in solving this problem, and they are absolutely adamant that U.S. forces run the least amount of danger to themselves in helping them do so. Edie?
Jim Stewart at the Pentagon, thank you. Supporters of undeclared presidential candidate Ross Perot were hoping he'd make it official today. Instead, the Texas billionaire finds his campaign is having to regroup before it can move on. Bill Lagatuda explains.
Ross Perot would have dearly loved to announce for president on this, his 62nd birthday, but his aides have admitted the campaign is flat out not ready. So, as his fans gathered in rallies from Dallas to Atlanta, hoping they'd be part of history, Perot checked in on the phone.
Hey, can you hear me out there?
But only to give them a tease.
And now we've got to all go redouble our efforts to get people registered and get the vote turned out in November.
It's been a rough few days for Perot, who spent more time than he ever envisioned fending off charges he's some kind of super snoop, which he says the Republicans unleashed just in time to spoil his party.
The propaganda that comes pouring out of the Republican Dirty Tricks Committee is just a beauty to behold.
Again today, the Republicans denied they're doing anything dirty, but from bizarre to paranoid, it seems like there's an official list of buzzwords to use when talking about their opponent. Not to mention
Inspector Perot, a man who never saw an investigation that he didn't like.
Ross Perot apparently has a compulsion. He's got this compulsion. It's a compulsion.
If you can take one word and keep repeating it, the sheer repetition makes it sink in.
Seeding the voters' minds with fear worked 4 years ago against Michael Dukakis, 28 years ago against Barry Goldwater. Remember the Daisy ad? 2, 1, 0. The Republicans today think Ross Perot is a goldmine of negatives, but if they overdo, they risk turning voters off.
All three candidates can throw that sort of information around. I don't really take that into account.
That's exactly how the Perot campaign wants voters to respond, that this kind of thing they're seeing is politics as usual, which Ross Perot is campaigning against. Edie?
Bill, how does the Perot campaign think it did in light of what many view as this having been a pivotal week for the campaign?
Well, Perot's professional handlers, and they are among the best in the business, urged him to get out in front of the controversies early and hit back hard, and they're generally pleased with the way he handled himself. I think it's a little too early to say whether or not the momentum of this campaign has been lost, but certainly a lot of the shine, a lot of the innocence that surrounded this movement is gone, I think, forever. And if more of these oddball stories about Perot continue to surface, we may be in for a very long and very nasty summer. Edie.
Bill Lagatuda, thanks so much. The Democrats have put together a platform for 1992, a process that's usually feisty and contentious. Not this time. Richard Threlkeld explains.
The Democrats really didn't debate this platform. They discussed it with impeccable good manners. The watchword is togetherness. No more of those noisy Democratic dust-ups of years gone by.
We're going to change that this year. We're going to be a unified party that's going to work together to make sure we win this election in November.
The platform itself is mostly the platform of the likely nominee, Bill Clinton. On economics, it's a platform even some conservatives could love.
The language of growth, the language of making government responsible is no longer a rhetoric of the right. It's a rhetoric of everybody in America. We know that it's not enough just to talk about how you divide the pie. We've got to enlarge it.
The platform's too conservative for Jerry Brown, who's trying to offer a couple of dozen amendments on the convention floor.
The platform as it's written does not touch the hearts of the American people. It doesn't reflect the proud tradition of the Democratic Party, and it is not a document on which the majority of our candidates can run with any hope of success.
The Clinton forces have made few accommodations with Brown, but late today they did strike an agreement with Paul Tsongas. Tsongas will address the convention, and there'll be debate on Tsongas' economic prescriptions.
They very sharply represent the differences which began last January between Senator Tsongas and Governor Clinton. And we're going to have our chance to have our position heard and debated. Whether it will pass or not is another matter.
This Democratic platform debate was so polite and dull, it was almost Republican. In August, if there's a big brawl over abortion rights at the GOP convention, the Republicans may start acting like Democrats. Every day, Campaign 92 gets stranger and stranger. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, Washington.
President Bush was out of the political spotlight today, preferring instead to play the role of proud father at the wedding of his daughter Dorothy Bush LeBlond to Robert Cook, a former aide to House Democratic leader Richard Gebhardt. The private ceremony was held this afternoon at Camp David. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, Nelson Mandela calls for mass protests against the white South African government. And a Yellowstone controversy. Could a church pull the plug on Old Faithful?
Healthy. A lot of foods are wearing that name. And yeah, they may have the numbers to back it up. But do they have a taste that'll make you want to eat them?
Now this is Healthy Favorite Smoked Turkey from Oscar Mayer. This is the real thing. Nothing funny. It's real turkey breast that's naturally low in fat and only 12 calories a slice.
And the taste? Well, the proof's right here.
New Healthy Favorites from Oscar Mayer.
Who else would you trust?
Come morning, I need a cereal that wakes me up and gets me going. These are just flakes. Just looking at it makes me want to snooze. Hold on a minute. Simple, wholesome, tastes good. Heavens, yeah. This could put some giddy up in my get along. What do you call it?
Kellogg's cornflakes.
Kellogg's cornflakes? You got me, didn't you? I hate that.
Taste them again for the first time.
Maybe it won't save the planet or make the whole world a better place.
Don't suppose you'd want to help me paint, would you?
Sure, Grandpa. But today, Will Bartlett made a choice that'll help keep a small part of the western sky the way it was meant to be. New Glidden Spread 2000. The first interior wall paint with no solvents that could harm the air.
Let's get some paint on that roller.
Glidden, a better way to paint.
South Africa's Nelson Mandela talked strike and protest today as black nationalists held a rally that had the look of a military camp. Martha Teichner was there.
Armed and dangerous, supporters of the African National Congress put on a show of force today. What they wanted from their leader, Nelson Mandela, was a matching show of force, a hard line on demands for an end to political violence before talks with the government can be restarted. And that's what they got.
Unless those demands are complied with, there can be no further negotiations between ourselves.
Mandela, opposed to violence, warned there is an alternative to peaceful negotiation, and that is mass action. This is politics in its public form, but at Boipatong, the result of politics is private grief as the township prepares to bury the victims of last week's massacre. Today, garments for mourning were being made in the traditional blue and black. More than 40 people were killed here. House to house, the Red Cross delivered emergency food to bereaved families before Monday's mass funeral. A dusty squatter camp called Slovo Park was where the worst killing took place. At shack number 17, Miriam Molete's husband and 3-year-old child were killed. She was injured. And you were shot and stabbed? What happened?
Stabbed, yeah.
Shot in the chest? Stabbed?
Yeah, and chopped here.
She says she saw white men among the killers, supporting allegations of government involvement in the massacre. Across the street, at number 109, Thabo Matope told the same story.
You're sure you saw and knew that there were white men there? I'm sure.
His wife and 9-month-old baby were stabbed to death. Today, he went to the funeral home to see the coffin his child will be buried in. For Thabo Matope, any political settlement now will be too late. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Boipatong.
A week of heavy rains in Bangladesh has made a bad situation even worse for 270,000 refugees from across the border in Burma. However, as Bill Whitaker reports, the refugees would rather suffer where they are than risk going home.
It has been an exodus of biblical proportions. Since December, more than 250,000 terrified, hungry Muslim refugees have fled into Bangladesh from neighboring Burma, despite the Burmese government's claims that it is trying to stop the flood of refugees. Thousands more stagger in every week, carrying their meager belongings and hellish tales of persecution at the hands of Burmese soldiers. They are running to one of the poorest nations on earth, from one of the most brutal.
It's clear that human rights violations are happening on a massive scale, and that among countries in the world, it would be very difficult to find a country now where there was a higher scale of violence than in Burma.
The refugees claim the government of predominantly Buddhist Burma is driving them out, burning Muslim villages, raping, killing. Burma's military rulers deny the charges. Under international pressure, they even have guaranteed the refugees' safe return. But the regime, with one of the world's worst human rights records, refuses to allow the UN or anyone to monitor the repatriation. So the refugees refuse to return.
The refugees do not agree to go back because they do not see that their security can be assured without some kind of an international presence.
A bipartisan group in Congress is calling on President Bush to pressure the junta to resolve the refugee crisis and improve human rights.
And they are a harshly repressive dictatorship. There's no reason we shouldn't be cutting off trade, that we shouldn't be saying let's stop all arms trafficking to Burma.
Disease kills hundreds in these squalid camps every month. Soon the monsoon rains will come. Still, these refugees seem convinced that life back in Burma would be worse even than this. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Tokyo.
A bomb placed on the roof of a police car exploded today in central Belfast. The car burst into flames, injuring the 2 police officers inside and 19 civilians in the crowded shopping district. Police say the man who planted the bomb escaped into a crowd of shoppers.
Your routine, rugged, grueling, day after day. It's even harder when athlete's foot routinely comes back. But today, there's prescription strength Lotrimin AF. Many types of fungus can cause athlete's foot, but Lotrimin AF is a broad spectrum medicine, so it kills them all. No wonder it's the brand most recommended by doctors. So while there's no finish line for you, there is for your athlete's foot, Lotrimin AF.
If you don't get to sleep, I won't get to sleep.
Nytol safely helps you fall asleep fast so you can get your Z's. Nytol or maximum strength Nytol.
Nytol will help you get your Z's. Everybody needs some
$12 for every mile over the limit.
That's $300.
You can add fast too. Next.
To send someone money fast, call 1-800-CALL-CASH or come to any Western Union location. Western Union, the fastest way to send money.
Of 144 different import and domestic cars, only the elite make J.D. Power & Associates' top 10 models an initial quality list. That list now includes the Oldsmobile Cutlass Ciera. We believe it reflects the commitment of the people who make it and the dealers who sell it, as well as the wisdom of the people who bought it. Cutlass Ciera from Oldsmobile, the power of intelligent engineering.
I'm Charles Kuralt. One of the world's great museums, the Guggenheim, reopens after a facelift. We'll have a preview this Sunday morning.
America said goodbye today to Polish musician and statesman Jan Paderewski. 51 years after his death, the U.S. is fulfilling its promise to return him to his native country. It has taken half a century, but today the remains of Polish pianist and patriot Ignace Jan Paderewski began the journey home.
This son of Poland, this citizen of the world, returns at last to a homeland free and independent. At last, Paderewski will rest in peace, for his people now live in liberty.
He was called the greatest pianist of his time, a musician whose aggressive skills on the keyboard mesmerized audiences. Paderewski was 80 when he gave this concert, playing Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody. Paderewski worked tirelessly for Poland's independence. At the end of World War I, with Europe in shambles, he persuaded President Woodrow Wilson to make the creation of a free Poland one of his 14 points for European peace. Paderewski served briefly as Poland's prime minister in 1919, but he returned to the United States at the outbreak of World War II to spend the rest of his life here. His remains were interred at Arlington National Cemetery.
And I want the Polish people to know that America stands resolutely with them in their heroic efforts today.
Prominent Polish Americans, including Veterans Affairs Secretary Edward Derwinski, were invited to the White House to honor Paderewski, an event seen as a bid for support this election year from the huge voting bloc of Eastern Europeans in the United States. Edie said Paderewski's dying wish was to return to Poland after it became free.
God gave Paderewski extraordinary talents, and he was generous in their use. His life was truly a symphony.
On July 5th, in Warsaw, the great musician will get his wish at last.
people think paint is paint. Is paint. But then again, most people aren't professional painters. There's only one paint this good, and there's only one place you can get it. The pros know. Ask Sherwin-Williams.
Hi, it's code for 148 19 Avenue, Paladin 19. 81 clear. 814 clear.
Of all the things around your house that need batteries, there's one thing that needs a good, fresh battery most of all. See your Allstate agent for a free home fire safety brochure. And please, check the battery in your smoke detector often.
Who are you going to call the most this month?
My dad in New York.
My stockbroker. My 7-year-old grandson who is a genius.
With Sprint's new program, The Most, you'll automatically save on whoever you call the most each month.
My sister Aura.
And with The Most, you'll also save every time you call one of the millions of other Sprint customers.
My brother Bubba in Sanford.
I call my mother in London.
My mother-in-law.
I think I better leave that one alone.
The White House said today that President Bush met last night with Navy Lieutenant Paula Coughlin and promised her a full investigation of the charges that she was sexually assaulted at a Navy Aviators Convention last year. For now, the Navy is suspending its investigation of the incident because some of the officers conducting the probe might be under suspicion themselves. The crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia continued its 13-day research mission today. 2 of the astronauts spent time in a vacuum container designed to help counteract the dizzying effects of weightlessness. A new storm system dumped more rain on Florida's Gulf Coast today. The area has been pounded by storms since midweek, causing widespread flooding. The rain has pushed rivers over their banks and turned roadways into waterways. With the presidential election a little more than 4 months away, voters who sift through all the polling data might feel a little confused. In his commentary tonight, Bruce Morton has an arithmetic lesson for voters.
Good grief, will you look at this guy? 56% of the people disapprove of the job he's doing. That's according to this CBS News New York Times poll. 56%, more than half. Look over here, 44% have an unfavorable opinion of him. That's really high. And 3/4 of the people say their minds are made up. They're not going to change. It's hard to see how a guy with those numbers could get elected dog catcher, never mind President of the United States. Yeah, well, look over here. 40% of the voters have an unfavorable opinion of this guy. That's pretty high, too. And only 16% have a favorable opinion of him. That's really major league low. And 3/4 of the people say their minds are made up too. They're not going to change either. It's hard to see how either of these guys could win. So what we need is a new face, right? Okay, here's a new face and we love him. Only 25% have an unfavorable opinion of him. Yeah, but that's twice as many as back at the beginning of May. His unfavorables are going up, and I'll bet he winds up just like the other two, another loser. I mean, 44% of the voters are already saying they want another choice. Another choice? Batman, maybe? The Penguin? The Director. Superman? Captain Kirk. Listen, voters, to a hard truth. There aren't going to be any more new faces. It's hard to get on all those ballots. You've got 3 choices. You're going to have 3 choices. And you're going to have to pick one of them to be President of the United States. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
The top-ranked tennis player in the world, America's Jim Courier, was upset today by the player ranked 193rd. Courier lost his 3rd-round match at Wimbledon to Russia's Andrei Orlovsky, who barely qualified for the tournament. He's the first qualifier ever to beat the Wimbledon top seed.
You may have heard recent allegations concerning Sears Auto Centers in California and New Jersey. I want you to know that we take such charges very seriously because they strike at the core of our company, our reputation for integrity. Sears Auto Center customer satisfaction rate is among the industry's highest, but after an extensive review and painful soul searching, we've concluded that our incentive compensation and goal-setting systems may have created an environment in which mistakes have occurred. To guard against such things happening, we've eliminated incentive compensation for the folks who recommend auto repairs, and we've changed their role to that of customer service advisor, and we'll reward them for keeping you satisfied. When this critical issue of trust is at stake, we feel we can't merely react. We must overreact. We're totally committed to maintaining your confidence. You have my word on it.
It's nothing serious. It only wakes me up a couple of times a week. It really doesn't affect me. I avoid foods that are fried or spicy. I can deal with it. I just take antacids.
If you have frequent heartburn symptoms like acid indigestion or burning in the chest, talk to your doctor. These may be signs of a serious medical problem. Your doctor has treatment plans that can help.
It's only a heartburn. I should learn to live with it. Right?
Frequent heartburn. Isn't it time you talk to your doctor?
In Alaska, the Mount Spur volcano, located 80 miles west of Anchorage, roared to life today for the first time in 39 years. The eruption sent a plume of ash and smoke more than 5 miles into the sky. An eruption of a different sort is at the center of a controversy in Yellowstone National Park. This week, a Senate subcommittee will take up the issue of how to protect the geysers in the park. And as John Blackstone reports, some landowners are steaming.
Around Yellowstone this summer, they're asking what would happen if Old Faithful suddenly became unfaithful.
What's at issue here is the premier resource in America's premier national park.
By some accounts, the geothermal wonders of Yellowstone are threatened by a church. The Church Universal and Triumphant, an organization often called a sect led by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, owns 12,000 acres on the border of Yellowstone Park. In one of its fields, the church has drilled a well. It had hoped to pump up water from a hot spring to create a natural heating source for church buildings.
We're a religious organization, and part of what we've dreamed about in coming up here is living a life based on organic agriculture and the healing properties of nature, one of which is the hot spring water rights that we bought with the property.
Nature makes a lot of hot water under Yellowstone.
Oh, it's hot.
Even far beneath the calm surface of Yellowstone Lake, the hot springs bubble constantly. But defenders of the park worry about what will happen if man starts to tap this geothermal treasure.
What we do know is that when you punch enough holes, particularly for geothermal development, that you can silence the geysers. And when they are silenced, they're extinguished permanently.
There is now a bill before Congress that would establish a 15-mile buffer zone around Yellowstone.
There's a big controversy around here that's allowing the landowners over here to drill wells and tap the geothermal energy over there.
The bill would prevent the church or any other landowner from tapping the water beneath their land.
What we need is rock-ribbed, ironclad assurances that Yellowstone Park will not be jeopardized in any way.
It's called the Old Faithful Protection Act. Like motherhood and apple pie, who could argue against it? Lots of people.
God help America. I really mean this. If we ever get to the point where the rights of a few people are not important to us.
As landowners see it, the Old Faithful Protection Act threatens something just as precious as Old Faithful, private property rights.
If they can take one right away, it sets a precedent, they'll start. Next thing would be my water rights. It just scares the heck out of me.
Geologists say limited drilling outside the park probably would not have any noticeable effect on the geysers that America has come to know and love. But that assurance has not been enough to stop this controversy from boiling over. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
That's the CBS Evening News. I'm Edie Magnus for Bob Schieffer. I'll see you again tomorrow evening. Good night.
An all-star field, including many top Americans, try to conquer the greens at the Buick Classic, continuing tomorrow on CBS Sports. This is CBS.
Next on the TV8 News Live at 6, he was given little chance of living, but today 4-year-old Jonathan Waller comes home from the hospital. TV8's Jeff Greenwood has the exclusive story.
Dozens of ham radio operators tune into each other around the country. We'll meet some of the Iowa hams and U2 fans waiting for that elusive ticket. Some camp out for days. TV8's Martin Augustine with that story.
Well, Steve Carlin has another mild day. Jeff Johnson with an incredible upset at Wimbledon. TV8 News is next.
For the most live coverage at noon, turn to TV8 News. This past week, Martin Augustine reported live from the State House as they wrapped up that special session. This week, he just looks like the kind of guy who could brighten your day, doesn't he? We'll have some laughs with comic Howie Mandel. Step into the past for some fun and games at Living History Farms as they prepare for an old-fashioned 4th. Former Iowan Father Ron Hennessy talks about living with death threats in El Salvador. We'll go to Wilkie House to meet the Des Moines All-Stars and delve into the fascination of dreams. That's the TV8 News live at noon.
Coming up on the next John McLaughlin Outdoors, it's known as one of the best smallmouth bass lakes in the country. We'll take you to Lake Vermilion in northeast Minnesota with John Skoondijk.
That's crowded. I think that's minnows. Nice fish.
You were right about that log, weren't you?
Yeah.
I thought maybe I might have cast a little close to it, but...
Then we'll draw for the winner in our Bass Boat giveaway. It's all on the next John McLaughlin Outdoors, this Sunday at noon on TV8.
Thank you for watching KCCI, TV8 in Des Moines. And now from TV8, Iowa's news leader, Steve Oswald, Sarah Jarvis, Steve Carlin with weather, and Jeff Johnson sports. This is TV8 News, live at 6.
It's been 114 days well spent. They'll never know what they've given back to us.
Relatives of 4-year-old Jonathan Waller thanking medical staff for 114 days they spent bringing the boy back to health. Good evening, and thanks for joining us.
A major development to report tonight. Jonathan Waller is out of the hospital, and we have the exclusive story here on TV8.
Now, as you recall, Jonathan wasn't even expected to live from the suspected physical abuse he suffered.
But today, he left the hospital, and TV8's Jeff Greenwood was there for the big day. Jeff, how's he doing?
Steve, he'll never fully recover from the injuries that led him to the hospital on March 5th, but he's doing better than anyone had ever dreamed. Today was a tearful goodbye for the hospital staff, and now Jonathan begins a new chapter of further recovery and life.
This was never supposed to happen. Jonathan Waller wasn't supposed to survive his massive head injury, internal injuries, broken bones, bruises, cuts, burns, and abrasions. To predict he'd ever leave the hospital was beyond wishful thinking. Not only did the boy survive, today he left the hospital for home at his aunt's house.
Here, put this leg down.
Jonathan Waller's family has been waiting for this for 114 days. He's beaten the odds so far, his family has all but given up predicting how much he'll recover.
Everything that they predicted, he's proved them wrong. And he has come home. He did not have to go to an institution of some sort. He has gotten to come home. And this will be home now. He's here to stay.
Margaret Dreyhouse is his aunt. She's been awarded temporary custody of the boy. Jonathan's mother is charged with allowing his debilitating abuse to happen. Her former boyfriend is charged with abusing him. Margaret Dreyhouse is a nurse, and that will help her take care of him. The boy needs intensive supervision and therapy, special food, medicine, and care. He was supposed to be blind, but now he can see. He's not supposed to be able to walk, but no one will be surprised if that happens. And he wasn't supposed to talk, but he's trying. The family credits his recovery to a miracle and a lot of help from doctors.
They'll never know what they've given back to us. And I don't think they'll ever know just how much we appreciate all they've done to give him back to us.
Jonathan's family plans to do whatever it takes to help him recover. They don't know how much he'll improve, but they're thankful for what's already happened. Today, they're not talking about his future. They're celebrating his return.
While Jonathan is in the custody of his aunt, a Polk County juvenile referee must decide whether to strip the boy's natural mother of her parental rights. And Steve, that decision could be announced as early as next week.
And Jeff, we probably should explain at this point that we did not show Jonathan's face today at the request of his family, right?
That is correct.
All right, and more in the story tonight at 10.
Right.
Thanks, Jeff.
The state fire marshal is investigating the cause of a fire that destroyed part of a vacant Des Moines motel overnight. At least 30 rooms of the Ramada Inn at Fleur and Army Post were destroyed, but the building was vacant and there are no injuries. The fire began about 3 o'clock this morning and took about 3 hours to put out. The city of Des Moines is considering buying the property, and recently it appraised at approximately $750,000. The city wants to build a long-term parking lot for the nearby airport on the property. Now, the airport's director, Bill Flannery, says the airport was recently given permission by the city council to buy the property, but it's not clear what impact the fire will have on that purchase. Urbandale police are still asking for your help in finding a suspect in 3 sexual assaults in the city. This is a composite drawing of a man who's accused of fondling 2 11-year-old girls and a 32-year-old woman. The incidents happened last week in separate locations, and police believe they're all related. The suspect is described as a white man, 23 to 30 years old, about 6 feet tall, with black curly hair and a mustache. If you have any information about this man, you're asked to call Urbandale Police at 278-3911.
In our farming state, it's not uncommon to hear reference to hams. Tonight, a group of hams with no agricultural connection is gathered east of downtown. TV8's Jill Lingwall has our story.
7 Alpha Iowa, 7 Alpha Iowa, Iowa, India, Oscar Whiskey Alpha, QSL.
They've gathered in the shadow of the state capitol.
Hello, CQ, CQ, CQ.
These guys aren't secret agents monitoring the activities of our esteemed leaders at the State House. They're ordinary people who have a high-tech hobby. They're ham radio operators, or just plain hams.
Amateur radio is a hobby where you use radios to talk to other people. Be interested in electronics, just being able to talk to other amateurs around the world.
These members of the Des Moines Amateur Radio Association are participating in a national field day, the objective of which is to set up a station from scratch to talk to as many similar stations as they can in a 24-hour period.
Delta, Michigan, thank you very much.
Provides training in operating under emergency conditions so that should an actual emergency ever occur, people will have had a little bit of an experience in operating in those kinds of situations.
Ham operators have helped get information out during national disasters such as the San Francisco earthquake and Hurricane Hugo. But generally, their interest in amateur radio is just for fun.
I'm in it to build the equipment and have fun learning more about how radio works.
Well, I like talking to people.
At last year's field day, the amateur radio operators here contacted more than 600 stations in 49 states and 9 Canadian provinces. This year, they plan to do even better, which means they may have to take a little more kidding about being the hams from the pig state. In Des Moines, Jill Lingwall, TV8 News.
At least 3 other amateur radio clubs in the Des Moines area also participated in today's National Field Day.
Well, we're still kind of keeping our eye on the sky, waiting for rain.
But we sure appreciate the sunshine for the weekend. Steve?
We've had a lot of nice sunshiny weather lately, and tomorrow's not going to disappoint if that's what you'd like. Weather beacon still on green, little change in temperature foreseen. We'll have partly cloudy skies tomorrow, see a high again in the lower to middle 80s, but there is some rain in the forecast, and I'll talk about that in just a bit.
All right, Steve, thanks a lot. And still to come on tonight's TVA News, John Pascuzzi takes us to the movie Unlawful Entry. He says it'll keep you on the edge of your seat.
And U2 fans line up for hours in hopes of getting tickets to the group's upcoming concert. We'll talk with the fans. Stay with us.